AITA for waiting to divorce my wife until it was a good time for me. My ex-wife and I were married for over 20 years and have 2 children together, 22 M and 20 F. For most of my marriage, things were pretty balanced. We both shared housework and childcare responsibilities. We were each stay-at-home parents for over a year after each child, her with our son and me with our son and daughter. We always had agreements on how we wanted to divide work and generally had decent communication. This changed when my oldest went to high school. My wife got a new job that was both very demanding on her time and was 50% travel. This meant that I had to handle everything about 2 weeks per month, and when she was home, she wasn't holding up her side of the work with agreements. I did my best to be accommodating, and we worked through redistributing chores, housework, a few times to make it fit her schedule better, but a lot of the work just kept falling to me. When the pandemic happened, things got worse, but I tried to just suck it up because I knew the lockdowns were temporary. Finally, when things opened back up, things continued to decline, and I asked to go to counselling. She missed a lot of our meetings and just didn't commit to it. At this point, I decided that I wanted a divorce. Unfortunately, it was a really tough time for the family. My son was getting ready for college in person after his freshman year, being remote, which was both financial and logistical challenge. At the same time, my daughter was also having some issues with depression, and I had become her main support person, with my wife gone half the time. I made a decision to wait until my daughter was in a better mental state and our family was in a financially stable place before I filed for divorce. I did my best to continue to contribute and was essentially a single parent for 3 years. On a few occasions I brought up counselling again, but my wife said things were good and wouldn't go. We pretty much didn't have sex for that period of time, and there was one summer where she essentially moved to North Carolina for 6 weeks for work. She came home on some weekends. Last year, after my daughter started sophomore year of college, and she was in a better place mentally and emotionally, I sold off some of my stock investments to create a trust for my kids to ensure college was covered. Then I filed for divorce. At first, my wife was really pissed. Then she left to live in North Carolina again. When she came back 4 weeks later, she said she wanted to work through it, but I told her I had made the decision to leave years ago and wasn't interested. We eventually worked through mediation and got an amicable divorce. My kids live with me now and support me, but all of my in-laws and even most of my family, outside of my sister, think I'm arsehole. They believe I should have forced the issue more when we started counselling and either divorced or made it clearer to my wife how important counselling was to me. They've called me selfish, and some of my in-laws are refusing to interact with my kids when they're at my house. For example, my daughter FaceTimed her grandmother once this summer, and she hung up once she saw that my daughter was at my house. They also created a bit of a scene at my son's graduation in the spring, refusing to acknowledge me and demanding that my son choose to celebrate with them, or me, rather than having dinner together as a group. I encouraged my son to go with them, and we had our own celebration later. But something happened at the dinner, and my son has lived with me and been almost no contact with them since. I honestly feel like I did what was best for my kids, but it feels like their mum's family is punishing them, and I feel like a terrible father. I admit that it might have been more mature to address the issue head-on with my relationship with my ex, but I felt that it was about more than just the two of us. Frankly, I feel like my lack of backbone years ago has made this divorce worse for my kids, but I also believe that if I had to do it again, I would still prioritize my kids over my own feelings and make the same choice. AITA, edit. Holy crap, this blew up. First off, thanks for folks who provided feedback and comments. I really felt like shit, and both the positive and negative comments helped me get a little perspective on things. I've seen a few comments come up multiple times, so I figure it's worth answering them here before I move on. This is an account I created to ask an embarrassing dating question earlier this year. I created it because my main username is recognizable, and I reused it now because I don't really want to air my issues associated with a known username. When my wife took the job, we were doing well financially, but the job still came with a big raise. I was making about $200,000, and the job she took gave her a raise from about $80,000 to $140,000. That was enough that we could go from saving enough to have an emergency fund to having enough to pay for our kids' college outright. We both work in tech, but she works for a defense contractor, and some of the work needs to be done on site, and only one of the offices related to her work is near where we live. When we originally discussed the job, her plan was to work in the high travel role for some time, then try to transfer to a lower travel role based near us. She got promoted a few times, and staying near our home wasn't an option unless she took a bit pay and title cut. When we divorced, I was making about $280,000, and she made a little over $300,000. Some folks were also confused by my stock comment. I'm a software engineer for a big tech company, and about 20 to 30% of my salary comes in the form of RSUs, restricted stock units. I'm not an investor by any means, and I was just selling off stock, mostly to cover my daughter's college and pay off what debt my son had. I know a lot of people are jumping right to an affair, but I really doubt it. In school, my wife and I were the obnoxious kids who reminded the teacher about homework, and she's a massive introvert. Her working late in a hotel room is much more likely than her sleeping around or keeping some secret family. There's a chance I'm wrong here, but I think this is more a situation where Reddit sometimes thinks all divorces end with infidelity. When I say we had an amicable divorce, I mean that more in the legal sense than the emotional sense. Uncontested might be a better term. The only significant asset we had that wasn't easily split was our home. My wife loves the house, and I frankly wanted something different, so she bought out my portion of it. Our kids are adults, so there's no custody. Our assets are mostly divisible, so no issues there. Our salaries were comparable, so there was no alimony. We each had a car. Overall, it was pretty straightforward to divide things evenly, and neither of us wanted to draw things out. We didn't end the marriage as friends by any means, but from a legal standpoint it was amicable because we decided on arrangement with a mediator and only involved lawyers briefly to actually draft the final paperwork for the judge to sign off on.